Okay, friends, it's great to see you all. For those of you whom I haven't yet met, and for those of you who do know me, I'm still Rabbi Emily Lozman Ostrov. I am the rabbi at Temple Shalom in Scotch Plains, and I am honored to be on the advisory committee for La Asok and have had the honor of teaching with many of you and being with you. Today, for our Tikva Through Hope, I am so excited and proud to introduce our rabbi for the afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you're coming in from. This is Rabbi Irwin Zeplowitz, who is a recently retired rabbi. So we got to cheer him on for that and enjoying what that means. So, as he said, he's got lots of wonderful freedom to share with us on this great topic. So, with that, Rabbi Zeplowitz, please take it away.
It's really nice to be on with everybody. I see a familiar face from my past and now my present, I should say, and some new faces. So I'm really also excited by the fact that this is we're on the cusp of Kislev, which is interestingly enough the darkest time of the year, and it seems rather appropriate to be teaching some classes on Tikva, on hope, at this dark time. I think in many ways the capacity that we have at Hanukkah to bring light into the world. Many people say that, the most important of all of the days, the greatest miracle is the eighth day. I'd like to suggest that the greatest miracle is the first day. It's that willingness to light that light, and then to let it continue. And so I hope that that's a framework and a background to what we're about to do. I like to say the bracha for study, la'asok b'divrei Torah, before we do. So if you'd like to join me, you can. And if not, you can just say Amen, or you can just sit and listen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu
Shanu
b'mitzvotav
B'mitzvotav
v'tzivanu
Tivanu La'asok
la'asok b'divrei Torah.
B'Torah.
Rabbi Lozman Ostrov, would you please allow me to share my screen?
Absolutely.
And so what I want to be able to do is to share it. That's perfect. Here we go. So what I'm going to try to do in very short, in very short time is to unpack one of my favorite passages in Pirkei Avot and in the Talmud. But I want to. I'm going to make this a little larger for those of you who have big screens. Um, I want to talk about a book that I actually just heard about within the last 15 days. The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Let me just ask a question here. How many of you can just kind of raise your hand either on the screen or in the chat. How many have actually even heard of this book, The Let Them Theory? See one of you, a few of them. So this is a really, really popular. This is a really popular book, and the author, who has written several books in the past, talks a little bit about the importance of not allowing others and what others feel or do to constrain our lives. That's easier said than done, but I think what she says here. I'm going to read very quickly. If your friend's not inviting you out to brunch this weekend, let them. If the person you're really attracted to is not interested in a commitment, let them, and so on and so on. And if you look towards the bottom, and I can share this, by the way, if you're interested in this material, I have way more material than I'm going to be able to read slowly in a half an hour, but I'm happy to. It's first of all, it's online. It's on, yeah, on Safaria, but I'm happy to send you a PDF or a copy or a link if you'd like later. And I'll give you my email at the end. But at the end, she says, let them be themselves because they're revealing who they are to you. Just let them, and then you get to choose what you do next. It's a really powerful, freeing statement. And so the question that I wanted to ask is, um, here at the beginning, since we cannot control others or the circumstances that affect us, what is it then that we can control? And this is an open question. So just unmute yourself and or maybe Rabbi Lozman Ostrov can kind of you if you raise your hand, you can be called on.
Oh, come
I
on.
like that in the chat, Sarah wrote, it promotes equanimity.
Can you, Sarah, can you expand on that a little bit? What do you mean when you say it expands equanimity?
Well, if you can let them, then you can step back and take the space to come up with what feels like a reasonable response that is more centered rather than knee jerk.
So that's wonderful. Thank you. And so the question really is, how is it that we then center ourselves? What are the things that we can do to control what we say, what we feel, how we act? And that, in a sense, is for me a really powerful act of empowerment and hopefulness. Now, I just want to wonder, is there any pushback to that? Do you feel like, since you can't control circumstances outside of yourself, you can't really control what anybody else does or says, you can't control the news feeds other than turning them off. Um, and essentially, all you can do is control yourself and find that centering, that equanimity. How can that, am I right in saying that that gives you a sense of hopefulness, or am I pushing that a little too hard, do you think? Okay, I'm gonna leave that. And then what
Oh,
I
we have two
oh,
comments.
okay, yep, go ahead.
David, do you want to go first for us?
Sure. Noting that my husband is also on this call, I do have a tendency to be controlling, and it's something I work on. So something like this doesn't make me feel hopeful, it makes me feel struggle.
Tell me why. Why does that make you feel struggle? And there's a text that's missing here, so I'm just looking to put it back in. Um,
Um,
why
because
does it make
it is a struggle for me because I do want to control things, not like, Trumpian style control, but just the way things are around the house. Um, and so that is, it's hard for me to let go.
so I think it is hard to let go. Um, and sorry, there was a text that for some reason, the main text that I wanted to study is missing. So I'm going to try to put it in while you're saying this. I think you're right that it is hard, but one of the things that Pirkei Avot and I think our traditions try to do is um, say that we have to work at it. It's a work in progress in many ways, like 12 steps that you have to keep moving at it. Cheryl, I see your hand is up. You have to unmute.
Yeah, um, I find it hopeful in the sense that it gives me a sense of freedom that I don't have to get stuck um, behind what other people are doing or saying. I can just do what is important to me. Um, if someone is doing or saying something that I don't like, I don't have to buy into it, and I don't have to get caught up in it. I can go around it, I can go over it, under it, or just ignore it and do my thing.
Great. So I think that you're both right that it's possible to do it, but I think it's work. It's not easy to do. So I'm really sorry. There are 65B2. I'm gonna put this in. Um,
Rabbi Zeplowitz, while you're doing that, I'm going to read Sarah's comment. I feel hopeful because I am at choice rather than letting circumstances or others control my reactivity. Incorporating Musar practice and meditation promotes my sense of well-being and autonomy. And then Jan adds, what everyone said is true, but constrained and frustrated. And then we have a question from Aviva and Yehuda. Where does community fit into this conversation?
okay, so I don't think that um, I I I I think before you can talk about um, before you can talk about community, you have to talk about the self. And so I'd like to suggest that there is community, and we're gonna get to that in a moment. I'm sorry that I didn't have this text. I don't know why suddenly it was missing, but I now put it back in. So this is the text. Um, Rabbi Eli says, in three matters, a true character is ascertained. And sorry that I don't have the Hebrew and the transliteration here, but I will put it in if you want it for yourself later. But there's an alliteration that happens in the Hebrew itself. In koso, one's cup, kiso, one's pocket, and koso, one's anger. And some say tsachako. So koso, kiso, kaaso, tsachako, right? So there's this alliteration. And I'd like to suggest that this is a framework for the individual. And in terms of relating to the society as a whole, until you can get, because you can't control society, what you can really ultimately do is control yourself. Um, that ultimately it's this capacity to be able to control oneself that leads to the ability to control others. There's a 19th century rabbi who once said that, when I was in my 20s, I tried to change the world. And then when I was in my 30s, I tried to change my country. When I was in my 40s, I realized I couldn't change my country. I tried to change my community. In my 50s, I realized I couldn't change my community. I had to focus more on my family, see if I could kind of change my family. And finally, this rabbi said, in my 60s, I finally said, you know what, I can't transform others. I have to change myself. And that's, he said, when I really became impactful. That in a sense, I'm not telling others, I'm living in a way that inspires others. So I, that doesn't stop, I think, our need to be involved in the community, but perhaps it's a perspective on whoever it is that asked that. Somebody want to read this because I'm now going to say that these three, the cup, the pocket, the anger, and maybe the fourth, the laughter, are large rubrics for how we can be in charge of ourselves and be hopeful about our capacity to make a difference. I'm sorry, I forgot who was it that said it's hard for me to feel that I can just be in control of myself when I'm so anxious and upset about the world outside or the feelings of others when I'm not in control. Um, I don't know how to answer that question. I think that's an internal question. But here, Rabbi Eli says your character and my character, and that all of our characters, is determined by these large rubrics. So, koso, I'm going to suggest, is about desire. Somebody want to read this passage? Who's not in a car, please?
I can read.
Go ahead.
Gemara relates that Rabbi but Rabba and Rabbi Zera
You want to start up
prepared.
here at
Oh,
Rava.
okay. Rabba said, one is obligated to become intoxicated with wine on Purim until you are so intoxicated that you does not know how to distinguish between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordecai.
Okay, we're supposed to drink a lot. Okay, so keep reading, please.
And the Gemara relates that Rabbi and Rabbi Zera prepared a Purim feast for each other, and they became intoxicated to the point that Rabbi arose and slaughtered Rabbi Zera.
This is a
Next,
party that definitely got out of control. Okay, keep
yes.
going, please.
The next day, when he became sober and realized what he had done, Rabbi asked God for mercy and revived him.
Thank God that Rabbah is a kind of a miracle worker or has the capacity to
You
address
talking
God
to me?
and
What did you
beseech.
say?
Somebody's still talking. So and beseeching God. So yes, he engages in manslaughter, but luckily he's a miracle worker. All right, keep going. Let's tell the
Then
story.
the next year, Rabbi said to Rabbi Zera, will your honor come and we will have the Purim feast together? And he said to him, miracles do not happen every occasion.
I love this story, right? Because this is like Rabbi Zera says, yeah, once, okay, thank you very much. I think I'm not going to come, right? That in a sense, this is, that you can't control yourself. And I can't rely that, okay, this time it worked, right? A clock, no matter how bad a situation is, no matter how bad somebody is, just like a clock is right twice a day, sometimes even really terrible people get things right and do things right, but I can't rely on that. And so here I'm suggesting it's a paradigm for controlling all kinds of desires that harm others, an abuse of power, sensual licentiousness. But the question here is desire itself the problem? Is the desire for alcohol, the desire for sex, the desire to exert power, to have political power or economic power, is that a problem? Or is desire not, could desire be a good thing? What do you think?
Well, there's a whole religion about this topic called Buddhism and the nature of desire. And it's like the very first teaching, I think, of the Buddha is actually, I think that this is a common misunderstanding. Desire is seen as the root of all suffering, but I think if you talk to any Buddhist scholar, they would say it's the attachment to desire, not the desire itself.
So I'm going to suggest that that's a thread even within Jewish thought as well. I once engaged in a dialogue group with Jews, Buddhists, and Christians. It was fascinating, and I here the desire itself is not the issue. It's the limits that or the attachment to it. And so in the Genesis story, and again, I'm not going to give you everything here, read everything. The Genesis story, God even realizes, okay, every human being has this desire. The Hebrew is V'yomer Adonai libo ki yetzer lev adam ra mitneorav. The yetzer, the yetzer, the inclination of the heart for a human being towards Ra. It's often translated as evil. And here that we're not supposed to covet, we're not supposed to desire anything. But then there's this passage that says in Genesis Rabbah, this midrash, that actually the Yetzer Hara is a good thing, or it could be good, because here he says the Yetzer Hine tov me'od, because it's very good, in fact. Why is it good? Because if it wasn't for the Yetzer Hara, that desire, you wouldn't strive to build a house. You wouldn't try to acquire things. You wouldn't marry. You wouldn't seek to have the sexual act to have a future, to have children. You wouldn't even engage in commerce. And so I've often translated Yetzer Hara not as the evil inclination, which always seems to imply it's somehow an inherent evil, but as something else. So what might be another way of translating Yetzer Hara? If there's
I've
something
tr I've always translated it as inclination towards oneself, and yet a total inclination towards others. Uh,
beautiful. I've often said that it's the animalistic urge. It's that Darwinian desire to survive. And that part of Darwin's understanding is that life thrives through, in a sense, the self dominating others. But of course, we know that, as somebody said earlier, what about the social implications? We know that sometimes if you become too dominant, if the self becomes too dominant, if it doesn't give space for the other or for those in society, the society itself may turn on that individual. And so there is this balance that koso, the desire for drink, is not necessarily bad, or for sex, or for commerce. These things are not necessarily bad in and of themselves, a priori, but they are challenging in terms of how we deal with others. Now, Kiso, how do we
uh,
deal with
uh,
our emotions?
could
Somebody
I
had
add to
a
that?
comment?
Could I add to that?
Please.
I see those two terms in the sense of the triplet from Hillel. If I am not for myself, that's yet a hurrah. If I'm only for myself, that's yet a toll. That's the way I see them.
Yeah, I would push back a little bit. I think if I am not for myself, who am I? Is the Yetzer Ra and the Yetzer Tov. If I am only for myself, what am I? Is both Yetzer. If you only give to others and you don't do for yourself, it can be self-destructive. It
Right.
can be harmful to your family. We have examples. For example, look at Abraham. Look at Moses. There are plenty of examples in the Tanakh of individuals who give so much to society, but their families are just screwed up, and we see that in many different situations.
Well, that's why they're paired together. And the first one is yourself, because if you're not there, take care of yourself, you can't help anybody else.
Right, right. But they're both important. In terms of anger, here, I'm not going to just give you all of the texts here, but it's interestingly enough that Maimonides, the Rambam, actually connects anger to one of the Ten Commandments. Which one of the Ten Commandments do you think he
Really.
might connect this to? You might be surprised, but he connects it to idolatry. Because idolatry, instead of putting God first, you're putting yourself first. Instead of seeing the godlike capacity within others, you put yourself and your perspective above them. And when you get angry, you lose, in a sense, your ability to be to have a sense of balance, to have a sense of compassion, to bring justice and a willingness to hear different points of view. And that anger is very self-serving. And so one of the things that he suggests, as you can see in this passage here, that you shouldn't get angry. Well, let's put it this way. You get angry, but it's all an act. Many people are probably on this call are aware that the Rambam follows the Aristotelian perspective of that middle path. You shouldn't be too um, you shouldn't be too generous, and you shouldn't be too selfish. You shouldn't be too compassionate, and you shouldn't be too strict in your judgment towards others. That you always find a middle path. But there's a couple of things where he says the middle path is not a good way. One of them is that of the emotion of anger. Now, what he says is you can use anger, and as you can see in this passage here, he says, if, for example, if you're teaching others, if you're teaching students, you can pretend to be angry but not feel it on the inside. And I remember the first time that I read this, a long time ago with my study partner, I felt like this is not something I can do. But the more I reflected on it, the more I came as a teacher to begin to fill it, to do it. And oftentimes, not very often, but every so often when I would, you know, seem to be angry, um, um, some students would get upset and they say, "Why are you so angry?" I said, uh, I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at your behavior. I'm not, and again, I said, and I'm not actually angry. I'm what my mother used to say is I'm disappointed, which is mother for I'm really angry. And so I'm disappointed, and I feel like you can be better than this. So I don't know whether you feel it's realistic or not, um, but it is an emotion of using anger as righteous indignation. And finally, kiso, we you may have heard this: where there's no bread, there's no Torah. Where there's no Torah, there's no bread. Many people use this passage as a way of saying, you have to give to support Jewish institutions. It's important to give money. But what's this, I think, also says is if you don't have an ethical foundation, if you don't have a moral basis, society itself can't work. And that working in and of itself is an important gift. And we talk a lot. You probably have heard that, money is the root of all evil. This comes from in the Christian scriptures from Timothy 6:10, that love of money is the root of all evil. That's not, again, how Judaism understands it. It's about using money for a decent purpose. That you have to work. It's important to work, but you have to do it with a sense of focus on making the world a better place. And finally, tzachako is laughter. In this passage, we're looking for who is it that will have a share in the world to come. This is the story of these jesters. What do they do? When we see two people who have a quarrel, we strive to make peace between them. Um, and then to just conclude, Mel Robbins at the end says, "You'll never be able to control what is happening around you. You'll never be able to control, you will also never be able to control your emotional responses because they are automatic, just like how your stress response turns on automatically. But you can always choose what you think, you say, or you do in response to other people, to the world around you, the emotions that are rising up inside of you. That's the source of your power." And this, for me, reminds me of that passage from the Jerusalem Talmud that we quote at the days of awe after we talk about the Unatana Tokef, who will live, who will die, who by strangling, who by fire, all these horrible things. But there are things that we can do that temper, or I think annul is probably not the best way of translating, but temper the decree. That is prayer, righteous giving, and repentance. And you can, if somebody wants, here, let me just read this last passage and then I'll just open it up to any last questions in the last minute. We can't control what fate has in store for us, but how we act, the choices we make in dealing with our inner desires, how we decide how to use the resources we have at hand, and what we do with the emotions we feel, that defines our life. That's our legacy. Hope, I argue, is the gift we give ourselves to not be defined by our fate, but by the choice we make to see our lives as more than merely existing. By tefillah, giving to create greater justice, tzedakah, and the acceptance that we can turn to God and being who we dream ourselves to be at our best, tshuva. And with that, I hope that I've given at least a suggestion about how, in this dark time of Kislev, we can find the light, not waiting for it to be within, outside, but we can be the light within. And just like light gives something else to the other with diminishing nothing of itself, so can we. And I'd like to suggest we change society by being the kind of peer person that we hope others will be, and that society is improved by being the kind of people we want to be. That, in a sense, tikkun hanefesh, this repair of the self, leads to tikkun olam, the repair of the world. Happy to take any last questions. I know we're at 12:30, and I just
One,
want to
one,
say thank you.
one
Go
quick
ahead.
statement. I've been told that a sense of humor is a sign of intelligence. People who don't have intelligence don't get it.
Well, I hope I have a good sense of humor then.
Rabbi Zeplowitz, I again want to say thank you, Yesher Koach, and thanks for bringing us some light. And I appreciate your willingness to stay on. So, as this formally concludes our time, but anyone who's willing to stay on, Rabbi Zeplowitz has offered to do so. So, I see a few people wanted to make a comment or question. So, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute, and I'll call on you, and we can continue for a few more minutes. So I see that Sarah
Great.
would like to ask something or say something.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just kind of looking quickly at the chat now. Sorry.
Well, I'm
Sarah, go ahead.
looking at your Safaria page, and I'm not sure what sheet you might be teaching from, because I don't see anything certainly around this date. I see November 3rd. I don't know if that was it. Didn't seem to
Hmm.
quite gel. So you said you would you
Yep.
would
Let me
send
let me
us a
share.
link
Yep.
to,
Yep. Let me take a look
Sarah, if
here.
you want to, Sarah, if you want to put your email in the chat, we'll make sure that.
I'm gonna put it in.
Oh, even better. Okay.
I'm gonna put the link in the chat right now.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think what happened is I was finishing it up yesterday and got rid of a couple of things that I wanted to put in there. So, but it's in there.
That's great. And we'll try to put that link with the video as well. Does anybody else have any comments or questions that you wanted to share?
I'm just going back. Put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. Yeah, I could have probably said this a lot quicker by saying that, but I think that's true. Anger is a motivator to social action and social justice. If you take a look up above or in the text itself, one of the things one of the questions I have is there a time when anger can be used in a positive way, such as Representative John Lewis, who said we should get into good trouble, necessary trouble. So I think that that's right. There is a time for anger. But the question is it possible to engage in those things where it seems like others can say you're angry, but you say, I'm not angry. I'm actually hopeful. I'm engaged in these things, I'm pushing you because I believe you can be better and I believe we can be better. We in the larger sense of society. And I'm gonna push hard because I believe that that's my job as an individual.
Beautiful.
I see here Seth Standard says avoid if possible obsession. I think that the problem is that I think human being we become addicted, right? We become addicted to drink, to porn, to money, um, to the allure of power, to the exertion of power. So I think these things are um, I think Jan says, yeah, it's a motivator. And so the question is what's the center? I mean, the study of text, that's one of the reasons I love Torah, right? Because you have a 3,000 year, 4,000, 3,500 year tradition in many different societies of trying to find one's center. And it's the cumulative sense of experience and understanding in times of trouble and in times of bounty and blessing of how to do what our traditions collectively and collaboratively have said is right. Just looking to some other comments if there's anybody else in terms of.
Carol wanted to say something.
Yeah,
Yep, go
I
ahead,
put it
Carol.
in the chat. I thought it would be ignored, but I'm going to mention it. Anger is often related to fear, and that's something you have not addressed. People often react in anger because they are afraid. And
So the question is how do you, in a sense, I've had these conversations with people with really deeply different political points of view. And to try to understand is what is it that, where, first of all, why are you so angry? What do you, to try to trace what the source of that anger is, and what is it that you're afraid of? And I think you're bang on. I think, but yirah, the Hebrew word yirah for fear, is also connected to respect. And I think it 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 anger is that it's that fine balance, right? Because anger is I'm going to just talk about my perspective, but your is um, it's like standing at the edge of a cliff. I don't go over, but I have a healthy respect for what can happen when I go over. And so I think it's that, we're supposed to have, even with God, how do we have a sense of Yirat Hashem? How do we have a sense of respect for God that is not being afraid of God, but recognizing the danger if I don't control my own sense of what I need to do to limit my behavior because there's God in that other person that I'm dealing with as well.
On a temporal level, my father always taught me, don't fear electricity, respect it, know what it can do.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting that it came from your father, right? Because you're supposed to have a sense of your for your mother and for your father, right? Kavod for your father and mother. So there's this whole kind of that's for a whole other but in a sense with parents as well that we shouldn't be afraid of parents,
Uh,
and hopefully as parents we don't create that, but a healthy respect. And I think that that's if since God, I believe, is in each individual, right? How do you have a sense of when you stand before God, before each person, and not be afraid of them, but to have respect for them, even when, and maybe particularly when they are expressing points of view that are really painful to hear, or difficult, or challenging. It's hard. It's hard stuff. Yeah, Bruce, I see.
I'm not an expert on Hebrew for sure, but I think the word for fear also connotes awe. And I always preferred the word awe. I don't want to fear my father. I want to look up in awe with respect what he can do for me, where he's leading me. I never liked the idea of being fearing God. I wanted to look up to God as a guidance.
Yeah. It does have a double entendre in Hebrew. I mean, it is. I mean, I prefer, like you, that, but I don't think we can avoid the fact that it also is a sense of yirah, of fear. But how do we not allow? I can't remember. I think it was Carol who said something about the importance of understanding. People often respond in anger because they're afraid. The question is, what are they afraid of? I see Bruce has a hand up.
Yeah, it's a curious question, I guess, in terms of how each
Thank
of
you,
us,
Connie. I know you're leaving. Sorry, go
it's
ahead,
a
Bruce.
curious question, just how each of us is able to respond or not respond to something that might cause us to be angry or feel offended. Very often it's like, for me anyway, it's like a hair trigger. Someone has flipped the switch and there's suddenly anger spouting out of my mouth as a result of this person, it feels like somebody stepped on my toe and I basically just want to push them away and say, get off my space. So I think there's a certain challenge, not just in terms of maturity, but in terms of understanding how we ourselves experience our emotions. And the challenge for me is really being silent in ways that I feel are not, silent, not being submissive, but being in some ways higher than, not higher, but I guess and control doesn't feel right, but there's some way in which not responding takes an enormous amount of strength and courage and inner knowledge that you're doing this for one reason. You're not being perceived as a weakling or as someone who's submissive or someone who's being stepped on. It's very, very challenging. You really
I
raised some
don't
important questions.
I hope I've not given the point of view that that what Rabbi Eli is suggesting is to be silent. I think lahavdil, the very opposite. I think there is a time, there's a time, as it says in Kohelet and Ecclesiastes, there's a time to speak and a time to be silent. It says elsewhere, silence is the rampart of wisdom in the book of Proverbs. I mean, it's important to sometimes stop. I think somebody early on in the hour said, sometimes it's important to just step back.
Well,
And I
stepping
think
back in the sense of, I mean, that requires a certain silence.
it does require a certain silence, but I don't think it means that one is silent. Right? It's hard. Look, it is hard. One of the things that anybody who knows me knows I have been far from silent in saying what I think. I'm not afraid to speak my mind, but I think that when it comes from a place of, but I'm always trying to thinking in my head, what's the long-term goal? What's the vision of and first of all, what is it that I want to create, both in my own character, right? Because Rabbi Eli is, it's about, my character is determined by what I say and how I respond. But I have a larger goal, and I think somebody said, what about society? I do have a larger goal. I want to make sure that my family treats one another in a caring and respectful way, even when they're upset with one another. I want the Jewish community that I'm a part of to do that. I want our nation to do that. I want the Jewish people to do that. So how do I model that? How do I and so just taking a breath and slowing down in terms of responding, letting them is not for me just letting people do whatever they want, but it is let them do what they do and then take some time to reflect what's the right thing that I want to do. And so I get it, Bruce. I mean, but having read a lot of this material over the years, it's kind of pushed me. Look, I had a terrible anger problem when I was younger, and I struggle with this, and I fight it. But I think I've over the years just become better at not giving in to the anger, or just shutting up for a second, and then allowing, okay, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish in my relationship with this person or here? So this
Yes,
is,
thank you.
I
Rabbi
think,
Zeplowitz, will you take one more comment
yeah,
or
one more and
question?
then we'll get off. Yeah.
Viva and Yehuda?
Yeah, so if you consider what here in the United States we consider some of the great speeches that are known by many, it's clear, if you once you've read the book of Deuteronomy a few times, it's kind of easy to pick out where some of the great speeches that draw on things that we all agree with come from. And they come from that nuance of action and teaching. That combination of you use what stirs you into action, but also into teaching so that you stir others into action. So that's kind of a circle. Yes, you should get angry when you see that something is not right, when you see that some humanity is being considered less human. It should stir you to do something, but that should come from a place which to me always goes back to Abraham and the idea of no, 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 don't hurt the child because now I've seen that you've gotten the point, that you have that combination of fear and trust. And it's very complicated, but I think when we study the great speeches in American history, they all go back to that same idea.
I mean, it's interesting that in Jewish thought, there is this kind of balance. If you take a look at Leviticus 19, it says, "Hocheach tocheach et amitecha," that you're supposed to
Yeah,
scold your neighbor.
yeah.
But then right after, it also says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself. And there's a lot of commentary on you're supposed to scold people, but you have to do it in a way that's loving. It's not just to let, just to blow steam. It's to try to bring them to the right, to what you believe is the right path. And if you can't do it, then, or if you think they're not going to pay attention, or you don't love them, that you really hate them in your like we live in a time where there's so much anger and there's so much hate and there's so much vitriol. I think Rabbi Eli is kind of saying, and and I also believe this is why, this book is particularly so important by Mel Robbins, right? That you don't, I know people who just they read the news and they just get so angry. And I said, why are you letting this person or this party or what's happening in Israel or what's happening, why are you letting it determine you? that that you can I feel the same way as you do, but how do I go about it? What's and this is more of a methodology. So look, well, I hope this has given you some food for thought and some hope. I'm you know, the very last thing I'll say, and this is Elizabeth knows this. I often say, what's the difference between a Jewish pessimist and a Jewish optimist? The Jewish pessimist says, oh, things can't get any worse. It's so horrible. Look at that's so worse. But the Jewish optimist says, sure they can. So, so I'm a Jewish optimist. So, could be a lot worse. We've lived in a lot worse times. Our great grandparents only wish they lived in times like this. And let's learn how to control ourselves. So,
Amen. Thank
okay.
you so much, everyone.